different seasons that cause for us to be in isolation so that we can receive the revelations we need from God with regards to how we're navigating our life in this physical experience. What's good, family? Welcome back. You're checked in with Amir Nazir. Before we get started with today's video, family, as always, I wish you all inner wealth, which we know is the overall state of our holistic health. All right, so today's video is about how God's isolation leads to elevation. So I have 4 main points I want to get through in today's video. So if you see me look down, I have my 4 points listed right here because I didn't want to forget them during this video. And we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So again, I'll be talking about how God's isolation leads to elevation. And so when you hear the word isolation, sometimes people will think of isolation as something negative. Sometimes people would think of isolation as you cutting yourself off from others, you cutting yourself off from the world, or just sometimes negativity surrounding this word isolation. But isolation in the context of God is actually holy. It's actually a symbol of purity. It's a symbol of cleansing, of pruning, of purging. And so I really want to iterate the importance of isolation. Each and every one of us, at some point in our lives, we've either already gone through isolation or we will go through isolation. And I'm a firm believer that it actually happens multiple times throughout our lives. There are different seasons that cause for us to be in isolation so that we can receive the revelations we need from God with regards to how we're navigating our life in this physical experience. And so I did want to start off with that before going into my very first point. Without further ado, my very first point is how I was able to reconnect with myself without any external noise or outside noise. So the first point will be about how I was able to reconnect with myself without any external or outside noise. So the period of isolation I will be referencing is when I moved to Columbus, Ohio. So at this time in my life, I had spent a year in Houston back in 2020 to 2021. And so in 2021, that summer, I relocated to Columbus, Ohio to pursue a master's degree at the Ohio State University. OHIO. So during this time, I went into a season and period of isolation. And so during this time, there was also a lot going on back home as well. And so when I was in Columbus, Ohio, there were a lot of factors that played into this isolation. So once I relocated from Houston to Columbus, Ohio, I had to start from scratch. I didn't know anyone in Columbus, Ohio. I had no friends in Columbus, Ohio. I had no family in Columbus, Ohio. I've never lived or visited Columbus, Ohio. This was also a cultural shift for me because in undergrad, I attended a historically Black college. And so this graduate school program was at a PWI, predominantly white institution. And so this entire season was a new start. It was a fresh start. It was, new beginnings. And I was navigating it without any outside noise, without any outside distractions, without any external noise or external distractions. And so initially, I wasn't necessarily in favor of this experience. I did it for a greater reason and calling beyond myself, which was my education. So I value my education. I prioritize my studies and my education. So, I was willing to, and the master's program was a year long. So I was willing to, for a year, be uncomfortable to achieve something that would be able to benefit me long term. I'm a firm believer in living a life for the long term game. I'm not a short term individual and I'm not a short term man. I believe in everything I do, it should be rooted in long term results, long term consistency, long term everything. And so during this time, the beauty in me having a fresh start, and as I mentioned before, not knowing anyone, I was able to reconnect with myself without any, distractions, without any external noise again. And so the beauty in that was truly reconnecting with myself in solitude and silence. So I was able to silence my mind, and I was able to be more intentional with where I was in life at the time and where I was going. And so this leads me to my second point during this isolation period, which is pruning. So pruning is pretty much getting rid of just anything that's dead, anything that's not growing, to prioritize fruitfulness and growth, right? So during this time period, following up from my first point, which was about, silencing out the external noise, I was then able to, again, understand now with this pruning process what it entailed for me. So my pruning process, it involved a lot, again, getting rid of limiting or self-defeating beliefs, attitudes, thoughts, behaviors, letting go of people, places, things, ideas that did not serve God and myself. So when I did relocate to Columbus, Ohio for my master's program, there are a lot of truths revealed to me during this isolation season and period. Again, with regard to who was for me, who was not for me. And honestly, during this time period, I either gravitated away from or lost a lot of, I would say, friends. And not really friends, but more so I understood that these people were not truly for me. And so during this time period, again, part of my pruning process was just letting go. And in life, it's important to understand that certain things run its course, right? So all good things must come to an end. And sometimes something bad comes to an end that was initially perceived as good. And that's the beauty in not only silencing the noise in the pruning process, because God reveals all truths in due time, right? We just need to be still and listen to God, seek God, right? And we need to trust God. We need to trust ourselves. We need to trust God, and we need to trust our intuition and our inner spirit, right? And so again, I was able to, just let go of people who did not align with my growth at that time, who did not align with, my elevation and where I was going, who did not align with me pursuing, God and my highest self. I had to just let go of those people, because if you are on your way up, you cannot, and whatever that looks like for you, and I would say in a more concise and effective analysis of this, if you are in a season or time where you are committed to your growth holistically, you would do yourself a disservice by surrounding yourself with people who may not be in alignment with your commitment to your growth. So if you're around your people who are not committed to their own growth, then of course they wouldn't commit to supporting you with your growth, because they are not committed to the growth within themselves, right? And so what then happens is a natural disconnect, right? And so now these people will, instead of building you up, they'll subconsciously tear you down. And so they'll have subconscious negative energy, they'll have subconscious negative thoughts, attitudes, and words that they may use, because what they'll be doing is projecting onto you how they feel about themselves. They'll project onto you their insecurities, or project onto you their a feeling of lack or scarcity, right? And so your growth will irritate their demons. So it's really also not even that person, but the demons that are on, or surrounding that person, that are irritated by your light, your aura, and where you're going in life, and the new commitment that you've made to God and yourself. And so during my pruning season in Ohio, the beauty in me going to a place where I then naturally was led into isolation by God, I was able to wake up, a light bulb went off, a light switch was flickered on, and I was able to truly evaluate my environment from a holistic perspective. So my environment with regards to people, places, things, ideas, again, everything within my environment, I was able to assess and truly determine what needed to stay and then what needed to be removed. And literally, as I removed things that did not serve God and myself, I literally created space to then receive the anointing and to receive the favor from God, right? And so, again, the pruning process was very important for me during this season of isolation. So the third piece I want to speak about today in my season and period of isolation while I was in Ohio was the idea for my business. So Afya Organic the idea was birthed while I was in Columbus, Ohio. So prior to this point, I had brainstormed quite a few different businesses based on my, passions and based on my gifts. And once I was in Ohio, I was able to, again, what did I mention earlier? Silence the noise was number one. Number two, the pruning. So as I silenced the noise, and then as I engaged in the pruning process, which is not easy, I was then able to receive the idea for my business, right? And so at this time, everything started to align and make sense. I even enrolled at this time in my master's program, I was also enrolled in, a course that was committed to holistic health and wellness, and everything really just started to align from that point on. I remember I first started off with a blog, actually. So the blog was titled The Black Health Enthusiast. At that time, I pretty much decided to go in a different direction with the business. So initially I did have a blog. I don't have it anymore. I may or may not implement a blog into my business model in the future, but for now, I don't have that blog. But that was my initial, I would say, introduction to my wellness brand. And so at that time, it was more, I don't want to say trial and error, but I just started, right? And in starting, clarity is then built over time. So with any idea, with any business, calling, what I would tell myself then, based on what I know now and experiences I've had since then, is just to start, because the sooner you start, the sooner the clarity comes. And so the beauty in me starting that blog, it actually then showed me what direction I truly wanted to go in with this business, what motto I wanted to create that aligned with, again, my preferred lifestyle, my, future goals, and everything that aligns with, my, well-being and wellness. And so again, the beauty in isolation is receiving revelations. This was one of the many revelations I received during that period of isolation in Ohio. And the, business idea was presented to me after, a lot of time spent at the drawing board, because everything I do is rooted in, God. And so anything rooted in God, it takes time. I didn't want to rush the process. I don't advise anyone to rush any process. It doesn't even have to be related to business, but any process that's worth enduring and going through, that's rooted in God, it shouldn't be rushed, because anything rooted in God, we must know and remember that in due season, as we continue to labor, and even when we grow weary, we should continue to labor, continue to work, continue to water the seeds that God planted in us to then plant on earth, because in due time we'll reap the harvest that we've watered, that we've consistently cultivated, right? And so when you're in life for the long haul, and when you're doing life based on the long-term game, and you're doing things that aligns with God, it takes time. It's important to enjoy the journey, engage with the journey, and be present in the journey. Because it's in these times where we're present, where we're engaged, that we receive the most revelations, that we receive the most fulfillment. Because there's no such thing as an overnight success. There's no such thing. I know the internet may, allude to this false narrative, but there's real work that's required behind the scenes. Real work that's required behind the scenes, real work that's required in a variety of aspects of our lives. And that work cannot be rushed. It's impossible if it's rooted in God. Now, if it's not rooted in God, hey, that's on, I wouldn't know what that looks like, but I know when your work and your purpose is rooted in God, everything is about timing. Everything is about enjoying the journey and the process and being in tune with God, being in tune with our spirit, and being in tune with our purpose and what we've been called here to do, right? And so, again, just this, season of isolation, not only did it bring about this revelation about the business that I would start, but it even brought on, again, everything then that is required for me to truly build this business and use it as a vehicle to fulfill my soul's purpose. So to me, it's more than just a business. It's really a vehicle that I'm using to fulfill my soul's purpose. So everything on earth, we are stewards of God's time, money, resources, and the list goes on. And when we're stewards of these things, we're actually borrowing them, right? So we are not God. We did not create these galaxies. We did not create Earth. We did not create, ourselves. We did not create the universe. We did not create all of these things. God did. And so all of it belongs to God. We are extensions of God. We are made in the image of God. But everything we touch and use on earth is a tool. It's a tool for us to fulfill our soul's purpose. Our soul's purpose that aligns with God's prophecy, right? And so I did want to iterate that point. And so again, so far we've discussed, again, during this season of isolation, me silencing the noise, external noise. I've talked about the pruning process, and then I've talked about how during this time period, I also received the revelations that I needed for my current business. And lastly, I want to talk about this fourth point, which was during the season of isolation, I was able to engage in deep self-work, right? And so again, I briefly mentioned a few moments ago the importance of doing the work behind the scenes. And so I think it's important to understand that what matters most is what we do when no one is watching, right? So during the deep self-work, it's really a healing process. It's really a healing journey. No one is telling me to heal. No one is watching to make sure I'm healing. No one is checking to see if I'm exercising consistently, if I'm eating healthy consistently, if I'm aligning and managing my time in such a way to accomplish my personal goals, my business goals, to prioritize my spiritual health, to prioritize my mental, emotional health. So no one's checking for me with regards to those things. I have to check for me with regards to those things. I have to prioritize a mirror. I have to prioritize me. I have to prioritize myself. I have to respect myself. I have to love myself. I have to give myself grace, kindness, compassion. I have to pour into myself because I can't pour from an empty cup, right? I have to pour into myself because my soul's purpose depends on it. My audience depends on it. I must prioritize me. And so the deep self-work is essentially that. It's the healing of childhood trauma, healing from young adulthood trauma. So there's also, because these traumas are linked, they're not independent of each other, they're actually aligned, right? So they're interconnected, because oftentimes you'll see traumas that were occurred or experienced in childhood manifest themselves into then our adulthood lives, right? And so if it goes unchecked, we can continue down paths subconsciously without even knowing it, of self-destruction, of self-sabotage, and the list goes on. And so during this time of isolation, I was able to engage in real deep self-work. And I do want to iterate, I've always been an intuitive individual since I was younger. I've always had a very curious mind. I've always reflected on myself. I've always been very, I don't want to say obsessed, but I've always been very committed to understanding my why. I've always been very committed to understanding my purpose here on earth, why I was here, why we're all here, why God created this physical experience. And because we could have just been, left in the spiritual realm, but God saw it fit to give us a physical experience. So I've always had a mind, a very deep, intellectually stimulated mind and curiosity about, God in this world and my purpose and place in it. So I've always, with that, it's both good, and I don't want to say bad, but I'll say good, and it can be overwhelming. And what I mean by overwhelming is, the other piece to this is that I also am my own worst critic too, right? Because I have these high expectations of myself, because I am very intuitive, sometimes I won't say it can work against me, but it can overwhelm me in the context that I am now deep in thought and may, overthink, or pretty much, I would say, I lost my train of thought. On that one. So, lost my train of thought. So I'll come back to that thought, because I actually lost my train of thought. But yes, so I've always been very intuitive, and so doing, this deep self-work, it really wasn't new to me. It was just an evolved, I would say, state now and then at this grown age, right? And so I was able to continue to prioritize, journaling, reflecting on, childhood experiences, reflecting on personal experiences, professional experiences. In this time, I'm able to really connect the dots, connect the pieces. I'm able to match, wow, so this experience was needed for this one, or this experience set me up for this experience, or this experience, I learned this lesson, I applied this lesson to this circumstance, which I was able to overcome said problem. That problem was rooted in this why, and that why originated from something that happened at age 5. So you get the point. During that time, so many dots were connected, so many revelations were received, and it's because of the deep self-work. We have to do the work. We have to do the praying to God. We have to have the tough conversations with God, the tough conversations with ourselves when no one else is watching, when we're in those four corners by ourselves, when we're in the comfort of our own home. What's our dialogue with ourselves? We have to be truthful with ourselves. We have to face ourselves in the mirror, look ourselves in the mirror. We have to truly do the work. Again, the journaling, the meditating, the prayer, the conversations with God, the reading of God's word. It's all necessary. The therapy, maybe you seek out verbal therapy or talk therapy. Some people seek out therapy from nature. Some people seek out sound therapy, music therapy. So this deep self work that I engaged in during that season of isolation was very profound for me, and it was very necessary, and it yielded a lot of great results for me. And this is the work that no one else sees but you, right? So when you engage in this deep self-work, you're growing, right? You're growing and you're evolving. And it's in these moments where you commit to the self-discipline, the sacrifice, again, when no one else is watching, that allows you to show up excellent, that allows you to show up healthy, allows you to show up committed, allows you to show up authentically in the work that you pursue. And it doesn't even have to be related to work that you pursue, but even just on a personal level, being able to have self-control, being able to regulate your own emotions, being able to, speak from a perspective of having been healed and continuing to heal. And so the deep self-work for me during this season of isolation, it really set me up in so many amazing ways for what had come after that experience. And it's not specific to even that season of isolation. I continued it beyond that point, right? As I mentioned earlier, because I've always been intuitive, the deep self-work for me, it wasn't difficult to engage in. The difficult part is just having open dialogue with yourself and being able to apply that knowledge to your current life. But the actual part of engaging in it isn't difficult for me because I've always been intuitive. And so I think the application of knowledge and wisdom is really what's important, in all aspects of our lives. And so I did just want to get on here and, just talk about isolation. It's really important. And something that I'll also say, one more thing I'll say, is that when you're committed to your growth, you're committed to God and seeking your highest self and choosing to kill off ego, lean into spirit, and be set apart from this world and not be worldly, but again, be in tune with your spirit. It gets lonely, right? And what I mean by it gets lonely is not that, be lonely or anything of that nature, but it gets lonely in the context that things, people, and places, and I want to put emphasis on people at this point, will naturally fall off. You'll notice how you will embark on this journey and you may feel alone because you'll realize that some of the people in your life were there for a season, a reason. Not everyone was meant to be with you for the long haul. Not everyone was meant to be with you until your dying days. And so you'll find that as you evolve and you grow, people will naturally fall off of the train ride that you're on, and that's okay. Face it head on, address your emotions, allow yourself to feel them, grieve if you have to, but move on, because what's more important is you and your health and your growth and your fulfillment of your purpose on this earth and your soul's purpose than to hold on to people, places, things, or ideas that hold you back. That's what we call attachment trauma. So don't become attached to your trauma or allow your trauma to attach itself to you as you're growing. As you're growing, detach yourself from your trauma, right? And that's why the deep self-work is important, because to truly live and continue living as we grow, you have to check trauma, you have to check subconscious ideas, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors that are actually rooted in self-destruction and self-sabotage, so that we can continue to grow and elevate. And it's okay to grieve. Have your period of grieving, but afterwards, pick yourself back up and keep moving forward and keep moving on, because your purpose in God and your purpose, your soul's purpose, fulfilling your soul's purpose is more important than holding on to anything that holds you back. And so I want to end today's video on that note. And I want to end today's video on the importance of understanding that isolation is truly God elevating us. Most of my greatest revelations received, greatest moments of growth holistically have been when I was to myself, right? When I had no distractions around me, I had no external noise. I was able to hear God. I was able to hear Amir. I was able to hear me, hear myself. I was able to connect with myself. In these moments of isolations, I've yielded the greatest results. I've yielded the greatest revelations, the greatest aha moments, the greatest, periods of growth. And it's very important to prioritize, this deep self-work. It's very important to silence out the noise, to, be open to the pruning process and go through the pruning process, and also be able to just be patient with ourselves. And so I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I really hope that content, but the message in the content was truly, aligned with some of what you may be experiencing now. And I just really want to iterate how God's isolation is truly a setup for our elevation, family. And during our seasons or periods of isolation, hold on. Keep your eyes on the road. Keep your eyes on the prize. Don't look left. Don't look right. Keep your eyes straight ahead on the prize, on the road. And you all know what that prize and road is. And don't let anyone, anything distract you from that road and from that prize. And I promise you, you're going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. And life is a long-term journey, and it doesn't end here. And that's really the truth. And so I'll see you all in the next video, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. And before I let you go, as always, family, I wish you all inner wealth, which we know is the overall state of our holistic health family. Peace.